Hello, everyone. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at this very, very interesting airliner from 1910s, actually, just almost 1920 here. And it was one of the first intercontinental airliners. Now, usually when people think airliners, they think, big tubes with all sorts of fancy jets. But this little monstrosity, known as the F.60, is actually propeller driven. And it kind of reminds me of a bomber. And I believe in several countries it actually was used as kind of a post-World War I bomber. It is quite an interesting plane, and we'll go ahead and get started with it right away. So first of all, climbing into this thing, you realize this is a blast from the past. Looking down the wings here, you can see we have a wooden canvas construction here. We have engine instrumentation on the wing, which I find super interesting. Leaning up here, you can see that big, big, big heavy engine chilling. Me as the pilot, I'm sitting up here on the top. I have no coverage. Personally, if you ask me, I'd rather be sitting inside of a cabin so I have a little bit of protection from the elements. But apparently, that just was not a priority back then. So it's just kind of fun. Oh, the fact our airspeed indicator is like a little paddle that just bends backwards and actually causes this little needle to deflect. I also appreciate the fact that our stall speed here is 30. That's incredible when you think about it. A couple other features that they've added on this one too is if you come back over here, you'll notice you have a handy dandy little clipboard. You've got a bunch of different button options here. I can press this button, of course, and I can send that down there to the floor if you just want to kind of sit it there. If I want to pull it back up, I can grab it like that. I like to kind of hit that button, which sends it down there, and then it comes and brings back up here and sort of stabs itself there. If I want to get rid of it, I can just click on it like that and send it back down and banish it to the lower parts of the aeroplane. Now, there's a bunch of really wild things that they chose to add to this plane, which I'm just so tickled with. For example, if you notice, I start floating around the cabin of this thing. Look at this train carriage. This is incredible. I also like the fact that the folks sitting inside of this are just, they got the little hair and they're kind of looking around. And you can see a couple folks kind of chilling around out front here. We have our mechanic who's looking kind of bored, not going to lie there. Hey, wake up. We got a flight to do, Chief. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through the process of getting this thing started. It's a little weird. One of the downsides of this particular plane is the way they model it is that like the manual that you have to get is online, and that manual might be different than the version of the plane that you have. And there's a little bit of like, how am I going to get anything kind of those? So I'm just going to kind of share with you what I do that works for me for this aircraft. So let's head over to the handy dandy clipboard here. Normal's fine for me. Loading, I prefer instant. We can go ahead and set this thing ready to fly at a moment's notice. This is super duper useful because you don't have to sit around and wait for it. I actually highly recommend this. You're less likely to goof up there. We have a couple different things for assistance depending on what you need here. The assistance is pretty cool. It'll actually remind you that you're going fast, you're going slow, all those kind of items. One of the things you're going to see up here in the corner is our chocks. I'm going to go ahead and engage those right away. One thing they did for us, which I think is awesome, is they gave us English and French. We can also switch to feet and feet meters. What's a mitra? A mitra. Of course, we can change the units should we need to do so, but I'm perfectly fine with the metric units. We have a neat little map here, so we don't get terribly lost. There's a whole built-in component here where you can pick up airmail and stuff like that. Really, really, really cool stuff. We have a ground page here. We're not going to be carrying a lot of fuel. This is a very, very short flight for us, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. You can see we have a little bit here, and I'm looking down at our essence meters. We need lots of essence to get around here. And I can see I've got about 6 essence in that tank, so I'm feeling pretty good right now. We have full water and oil. I'm pretty much ready to rock in that regard. Like I said, I don't need to change that or anything like that. Pretty good. Engine does not need to be replaced this time. Coming down here, we're not on fire, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to head over to CG. We've loaded all sorts of folks inside here. One of the cool things here is you could actually change the loading of the plane. Like apparently I can get rid of my mechanic or there's some bags out back and stuff. You of course, make sure when you do this, you go ahead and boarding and load kind of a thing like that. Because if you are going to actually load this thing up, you have to actually hit the button to do it. And you can see our stairs and our front door is actually ready to go. You can actually click some pre-configured pieces. And of course, you're going to get all sorts of things warning you up here. The chocks have been set, the services, if I need to, I can just click those to kind of shut them off. The career page does not work yet. Looks interesting. But I don't know, for the stuff that I do, it's probably a bit more than me. We have a damage analysis. They spent a long time modeling the damage on this aircraft very, very, very carefully. And I've replaced the engine on this in case you haven't noticed. And what will actually happen is as you take damage, it'll actually show physically on the aircraft itself the damage that you've taken. And your mechanic's going to start yelling at you. It's actually pretty cool, some of the stuff that you'll hear to that effect. And of course, you can come in here and get a detailed readout. You have some orders. What I could actually do is I could click on this and I could order my mechanic to immediately start cranking on different components here. The other thing too is if we needed to, we could rotate the propellers, to get that oil kind of loosened up and limber so we're ready to rock in that regard. And of course, we have a failure page where if you want to do some real damage, you can go in here and have a good time with it. But I'm not going to worry about that too much today, only on account of the fact, like I said, you're just going to be complicating things that don't need to be complicated. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and head up to orders. I'm actually going to order the rotation of this propeller here. He's going to get that thing cranking. Now, make sure your magnetos are off before you do this. It would be very, very rude. By the way, all the handles are backwards. There we go. Ooh, apparently, I just opened up a little hatch down here. It's kind of neat that they have a little door here just in case you need to make sure what the engine is or is not doing kind of a thing. One of the fun things I find about this engine itself, which really, 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 really cool, is that the color of the smoke coming off of it tells you how good your mixture is. And I just find that kind of fun. All right, let's go ahead and rotate the propeller on the other side. Come on, Charlie. Put some elbow into it. Nice. Now, one of the fun things that I just found so fascinating about this aircraft is there's no battery. So we actually generate electricity with a wind turbine, or not a wind turbine, but a little, yeah, essentially what it is. We actually have a little electrical generator sitting back here for power. So if I start clicking switches for like the cabin lighting and like interior lights and all those kind of things, nothing's actually going to happen on account of the fact that, like, as I was just stating, it isn't a thing in this aircraft. So it's just kind of interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come swing over here. We have our starter. We have our fuel pump. I'm going to come down here to our igniters. We're going to go set their igniters to the on position. Pretty straightforward. We're going to swing down here. We have the master switch. I can turn that on. Remember, we have a battery, but we don't have a battery. But we have a battery, but we don't. It's kind of one of those sort of things. Swinging down here, I'm going to go ahead and set my fuel to the fuel tank front. Now, this is kind of one of the tricky things here, is we're actually going to have to go ahead and make it so we get enough fuel pressure. But there's no fuel pressure gauge on this thing. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice that little thing that says the little number is increasing. There we go. Clear prop. That is an angry propeller. Nice. Come on. Come on. Victory. There we go. Yeehaw. Okay, if that down isn't incredibly annoying, I don't know what is. I thought my voice was bad. Listen to that thing. All right, we are started. And those two engines are happily crunching along right now. You can hear them kind of snapping and crackling and popping over there. As all of our instrumentation starts coming up, we'll go ahead and check to make sure we have oil pressure, which we do. Oil temperature is a little on the low side at the moment, as you can see. We are still in the danger zone, kind of a thing like that. Looking over my right-hand side, I can also see that our oil pressure, it's starting to come up. So at least, we got some positive news in that regard. Also, the fact the aircraft is kind of bobbing back and forth and everything. And that engine noise is so irritating, I'm actually going to significantly reduce my volume. Man, that's impressively loud. So hopefully everybody appreciates that. So now that we're good to go, believe it or not, this aircraft does not have any radios or anything along those lines. It's just not a thing. If I want to do something, I have to actually engage it one way or the other. One thing I would very much appreciate, though, is if I could tell the people down here to go ahead and get rid of our doors and our stairs and everything. I don't really like the idea of, flying around with this thing open. It's kind of amusing in its own sort of way, but I don't know. I don't know if I'd do that. Go ahead and give these engines a few more moments to warm up. Oil pressure, kilograms per cubic centimeter, looks pretty good to me. We should get a ATIS. Hey, Charlie, what's the weather today? Charles? Hey, Charles? Nice. Hey, no smoking. All right, so taxiing this thing around the ground is a bit of a process. Generally, what I usually do for this particular one is when I do want to kind of make it go, by the way, you can see the staircase disappear. I ask the door to close, but there it goes. It's just a matter of finding the position where you can see. So what I like to do is actually raise my head up over. And keep in mind, you'd have wing walkers to kind of help you out with this in the real world. So they'd be kind of sitting there and kind of giving you a push. Now, believe it or not, there is no ground nose wheel steering on this thing. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to be using differential thrust. So I can actually crank up that engine on the left side to kind of push us over. You can see all the valves happily kind of snapping and popping and crackling there. And now we're going to move. We're probably going to run into 5 or 6 things along the way, but that's what I get for choosing Block Island rather than a big open grass field, which would be appropriate for something like this. Now, when I was first learning this one, by the way, you can see the little electrical generator. It's just barely spinning right now. We're not moving very quickly. Now, believe it or not, I can do a midfield takeoff with this thing pretty effortlessly because our rotate speed is 40 knots, which is not much to say. Not much to say at all. Just going to kind of position myself, take a quick look around. It's looking pretty good so far. Nobody seems to be in the traffic pattern. There we go. Let's just start making our way down here. This thing's so cool. I don't know. I'm a softie for aircraft that are just ridiculous, and this is definitely ridiculous. I mean, it feels like if somebody tried to make a Gary's Mod airplane. Speaking of which, somebody did do a Gary's Mod airplane, but that is a video for another day. I just love this thing. Could you imagine, everybody sitting inside going, "What? I can't hear you. It's too loud." Meanwhile, you're just sitting up here with your little scarf kind of going, kind of directly behind your back. Yes, that is the sound a scarf makes, by the way. I'm just kind of getting going, and then you can see all sorts of black smoke, and every once in a while you hear that pop, 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 pop of a little bit of stuff of backfiring. Of course, we're doing our little zigzags, little zigzaggly. Now, it would be nice if I could float all the way down here to the front seat. All right, I'm done with that. Go away. All right, it seems pretty good. Now, I think we're almost getting lift here. I got to be careful. Man, this thing is jacked. For those of you who have not tried this airplane in VR, it is a trip. This thing is just so chunky. Oh, I knew we were going to hit something eventually. Do we need some ground handling, or what do we got here? Ground handling. Nothing? So we have ourselves all lined up on the runway, ready to rock here. Things are looking pretty good. Engines are looking pretty stable. Took a look over there a minute ago, and incredibly, when you do a cold start, you're probably going to observe the fact that the engines actually don't start warmed up. And it's just kind of one of those things where you just want to kind of be mindful of it, because the people who designed this aircraft really went all their way out to, kind of simulate what it was like to try to operate something of this particular age. And, kind of being aware of all kind of the little quirks and things that kind of go along with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and come visit with everybody. Hey, Charles, what's up? Everybody's looking pretty good. The Champ d'Outoin, I'll go pop back up here. I'm looking pretty good. Check in. It looks pretty solid. All right, so getting this thing airborne is a relatively straightforward process. You basically just need to get enough lift to get going. But, and this is a weird but with this airplane, its climb speed is basically 5 knots off its liftoff speed. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to release the chocks, which is going to get us rolling here. If you're concerned about the chocks, if you forgot, see a little red icon that just turned gray. I'm going to go ahead and apply full power here. Smoothly. And we're just going to play with the rudder a lot. We have a 3-minute limitation over 1900 RPM here. So we're going to get airborne, and then we're going to immediately kill it. You can see our airspeed indicator is happily chugging. And that's it. And we're airborne. Very easy to get this thing flying. It does not take a lot to get going here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pitch the nose up here. And as I was saying, the climb angle is kind of how you get your altitude here. You're going to not see so much the, like what we usually do where we try to get up to like a really high speed and just kind of use it that way. Generally with this one, we're just going to kind of hold it at a pretty nasty angle, which I just find interesting. It's not like so we have, an attitude indicator or anything on this, but that's okay. All right, that looks about 85. That's a pretty good speed for climb. I'm going to go ahead and reduce my power. About 1900. We're going to drop right down to just below 1800 here. That's going to be give me a nice continuous power. Anything less than 1800 is okay for the engines on this one, based on what the manual said. And we're just going to hold about 85 kilometers per hour. That's going to get us climbing pretty effectively. One thing I do appreciate is if you look right up there, you can see very clearly our little airspeed indicator dancing. And we can come down here and you can see it as well. Like I said, kind of interesting when you ask me. Once we get airborne, it's just a matter of kind of cleaning things up here and there, depending sort of what you need to do. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that's all set. That looks good to me. That looks good to me. All right, looks good. And now we can begin maneuvering. Now, one of the downsides to this aircraft is there is no ball to be stepping on. So when you're taking turns with this one, you kind of have to do it the old-fashioned way. I'm going to go ahead and tilt my aircraft to the right. And I'm going to go ahead and apply equal amount of rudder and really stomp on the rudder. And I mean stomp on the rudder. The reason being is if you observe, the tail on this thing is a little teeny tiny thing. And it unfortunately does not do much for us. Okay, right rudder. All right, we'll go ahead and come out of that turn here. A little bit of left rudder. And again, this thing handles exactly like it looks like. Somebody took a trolley and decided to put wings on it. All right, I'll watch that RPM, by the way. As you can see, we're starting to creep up here. We want to try to keep it under 1800 RPM. Only on account of the fact, like I said, that's going to be a 5-minute continuous limit here. We don't want to shorten the lives of our engines any more than we normally do. So now the next problem, of course, that we face is identifying where we are. So we're going to be heading north here. But bring myself to the right. I can actually put a little more angles on this thing. You can see my airspeed immediately bleeding away. It's just, oh man, what a high drag aircraft this thing is. And now we're going to start making our way up towards the main. And just kind of give it a couple tugs here, a couple tugs there. Not do anything too aggressively with it. Now, our cruise speed on this thing is not particularly high. You get about 75 to 80 knots out of it, and that's about it. One of the downsides, like I said, is because of the design and because of how slow and how high drag it is, it is not a range monster by any means. So you're going to be kind of limited. One thing I love is the fact, because that airspeed indicator is visible, you can just kind of look up a little bit, and it's just right there waiting for you. Originally, I thought it was an angle of attack indicator, but like I said, according to the manual, it's supposed to be airspeed. Now, the cool thing is, if I look directly behind me, you'll observe that little wind turbine is happily chunking along there, providing us with electrical power for, like the lights and stuff that go on board this particular aircraft. Now, time to climb on this thing. If you have a calendar, that's probably going to be a more accurate measurement of speed. Yes, I know how that works. But it will get you up pretty high. What they were talking about in the manual for this one is basically the idea that, you want to climb in a position and fly in a position, so if you lose both engines, you can safely get down. Unfortunately for us, we're traveling over the water here, so it's not going to go so well for us in the event that we have an engine failure at some point during our journey here. All right, going to kind of swing a little to the left here. No radios, by the way, so I'm sorry to say, but people who really enjoy using VATSIM, you're not going to be able to VATSIM this thing. It's not as though we have a transponder either, or GPS for that matter. Now, some of you, of course, say, well, how am I supposed to navigate this aircraft? Well, you could, of course, come up here and use the navigation option. You can do a little VFR map. I'm a GTN 750. Of course, I couldn't open this one up because, like I said, no avionics. We also, of course, if you have Navigraph or something like that, or if you just want to get old-fashioned, go ahead and find yourself a nice river and basically stay on it until you get to your destination. Speaking of which, all right, we are on our way. We've got ourselves a pretty good amount of these things called M's, and we're making our way pretty comfortably. We can reduce power. Like I said, the key thing here is that we do not want to overspeed the aircraft. As you can see, by looking away from the engines for a second, I've instantly hit the overspeed. So you want to be very, very cognizant of the airspeed as you're traveling. This is not an aircraft where we can just kind of leave it at climb power and kind of forget about it. If you do that, you will simply just overspeed the aircraft, so be mindful of that. One of the nice things that the designers of this aircraft, the 3D version, saying the one we're flying right now, is they made the trim very, very slow. So it makes it very, very easy to get this aircraft trim. One of the things you're going to notice in cruise here is the fact that we've got this kind of a pretty serious nose-up attitude. We're doing about 1,600 RPM. You can see we're getting a little slow. I'll give it just a little bit more power here. There we go. It looks good. Like I said, as long as you don't exceed 1,800. So you're going to be constantly kind of battling this, getting just the right angle of attack, and then trying to get your nose back down and then not overspeeding it. It's just the nature of the beast. So one of the interesting things they simulated in this aircraft is this lovely color of the white goo that's coming out of the back of our engines right now. That color actually indicates how good your performance of this aircraft is right now as far as the engines go. I'm actually going to trim it down a little bit here. We've got more than enough going. There we go. So what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to use the mixture control, which is this one here, and basically fits with this and listen to the engines to determine when you've hit the appropriate mixture situation. Before I do that, though, I want to make sure this aircraft is pretty comfortable. It looks good here. So if we look at the smoke, let me go ahead and pull the mixture back a little bit. See how it stopped? Notice the smoke stopped. And you'll also notice that we've had a substantial increase in RPM. The reason now is because we're no longer running rich. The way you know that you're running rich is you get that nasty smoke trail behind it. The other thing you're going to notice as we're cruising around with this one, and again, it did not take much of a mixture adjustment to get that to work. I have a little knob on my joystick that makes it easy to do. Now that that's been set, our engines are actually running very happily. We're in the correct setting here. Looking over here, you can see that we've got the correct temperatures, we have the correct pressures. Remember, we have two engines, so make sure you check both of them. That's kind of one of those things. And you can see everything's looking pretty darn good right now. Our airspeed is nice. I think we're doing, let's call it about 75 miles an hour. We're not going to break any intercontinental time records or anything with this thing. It's just not meant for it. And now we're just here to kind of enjoy our flight. Now, if you're curious where our compass is, we actually do have a compass, and it's located right down here on the floor. You can see we're heading about north-northwest right now, which is pretty desirable. There's no way to modify this item. And one thing I find very interesting is on the actual altimeter here, which is pretty wild, you'll notice there's no adjustment for pressure right now. So now that we're kind of on our way up, that's it. We're stuck. Basically, that's going to be our altitude, and we can't adjust it unless we actually manually did the connections and corrections for it. All right, so we're going to go ahead now, keep cruising towards our lovely destination. I would never want to fly this plane in the real world over water like this, because I really hope the lower passenger cabin is a good boat, in addition to being a very comfortable ride. Now we're ready to bring this thing down and for a nice soft landing. Haha, I wish it was a nice soft landing. This thing is actually very challenging to get down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and reduce some power here. We're going to start making our way down. There are no high drag devices anywhere to be seen on this aircraft. The nice thing is it is a water-cooled engine, so that concept of shock cooling, which we're always so terrified about with regular air-cooled engines, it's not that it's not a problem, it's just not as big of a problem that we have to worry about here. We do want to keep an eye on our temperatures and pressures, those are P's and T's if you prefer, and we're just going to start making our way down to the ground. Now, one of the things you probably notice about this aircraft is we are a tail-dragging aircraft, and we do have a skid on this. So when we land this one, the safest way to put it down is to actually go for the three-point landing. If you try to do anything more aggressive than a three-point landing, like especially if you try to do a wheel landing, you're probably going to bottom out. And like I said, this aircraft does not tolerate damage very well. This is definitely not a Cessna 172 where you can go boing, whoopsie daisies. It's not going to appreciate that very much. So again, pull the nose up. I can notice that we're thoroughly into the red region here. Notice I've got the engines completely zeroed out. One of the interesting things about the airspeed indicator, the little piece that you have down there, is one of the things I've observed with this is if you're in any form of turbulence, that instrument will suddenly show an extreme speed, even though you're not actually moving at that extreme speed. Now, our approach speed on this aircraft is incredibly low. I'm actually going to sit up a little bit here, and I'll get a better look out the window. I'm taking a look at my new airspeed indicator, which I have up on the nose, and you can see it is thoroughly pinned here. Go ahead and flip us into a bit of a skid here. We'll do some old-fashioned flying here. There we go. That's much better. I'm sure the passengers are very much appreciating the fact they're flying sideways right now, but hey, you got to do what you got to do to get us down on the ground. Man, I'm pretty impressed. This thing slips great. I have to unslip it. This is so bizarre. You can tell it's an old-fashioned plane. There we go. Now we're a little bit slower. Okay. Now this is the hard part, and this is the part I will readily admit I find very, very challenging with this aircraft. It is so difficult to see. They just did not think about the pilot at all when they decided to design this aircraft. All right, got to line ourselves up.
40 meters. 30 meters.
Airspeed's good. Got about 45 miles an hour here.
10 meters.
Just going to hold the nose up just a little bit. And that's it. We're down. We're here. Do not hit the brakes hard. We're here. So as you can see, this is a pretty wild airplane. And I have such mixed feelings about this aircraft. On the one hand, I think it's such a cool little piece of history. On the other hand, it's so impractical. But again, that's something that makes aircraft like this a lot of fun. As always, enjoy.